Welcome to our fall online launch party reading in celebration of the newest issue of Santa Monica Review. I'm your host, Andrew Tonkovich, editor of the magazine, thanking you for supporting our journal and the writers in it, those reading this evening, and all whose excellent work appears in this issue, which, by the way, should arrive soon if it hasn't already. 15 original pieces and a gorgeous cover collage by our literary and artistic pal, Dylan Landis. The magazine, founded by Jim Crusoe, is in its 33rd year of publishing visionary, avant-garde, funny, political work in prose, with a commitment to diversity, creativity, and especially promoting the work of West Coast writers. It's sponsored by Santa Monica College and continues to thrive today because of the advocacy and direction I get from Don Gerard, Linda Sullivan, our Santa Monica College president, and the amazing support from the review's staff, including designers Vivian Chu, Mingye Wei, proofreaders Jonathan Cohen and Beth Riley, PIO Grace Smith, webmeister Paul Troutwine, and promotions goddess Stephanie Rick. Oh, and just to brag, not one, but two recent stories from the magazine will be included in the next Pushcart Prize anthology. There's more to say on any number of topics of interest to you and our community, but lucky for us, Beyond Baroque Executive Director Quentin Ring is here for that. The ongoing relationships of mutual aid, institutional cooperation, and solidarity between the review and so many terrific outfits have sustained and encouraged us, and one of the longest and happiest has been with the legendary Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. After Quentin's welcome, you will hear, in the order advertised, short readings from our 5 featured writers. An amazing lineup: Tom Whalen, Mary Taugher, Lisa Teasley, Diane Lefer, and Adolfo Guzman-Lopez. Can you believe it? No further intros, just each sharing their writing with the best audience ever, readers who value voice, art, insight, humor, imagination, and always terrific writing. Thank you so much, friends, for being here. And now, Beyond Baroque's Quentin Ring.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much, Andrew. I'm honored to have been invited to introduce the launch of this edition of the Santa Monica Review. Frankly, it's just a pleasure to be here in the company of Tom Whalen, Mary Taugher, Lisa Teasley, Adolfo Guzman-Lopez, and Diane Lefer. I can't wait to hear your readings. I really hope everyone in the audience will buy copies of this edition, and I hope you'll support the Santa Monica Review in general. The Santa Monica Review is truly a great journal and an incredibly important part of Southern California's literary scene. As Andrew mentioned, I am the executive director of Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. I thought I'd take this time just to say a little bit about Beyond Baroque. We are a literary space located in Venice, California, and also in these ongoing COVID days, anywhere you can find an internet connection. As an organization, we are dedicated to the artistic possibilities of language through cultivating new writing, presenting contemporary literature and art, and building a diverse literary community. Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles' oldest literary institution. We were founded in 1968 by a man named George Jury Smith. George founded Beyond Baroque to be an interdisciplinary space focused on cultivating new approaches to writing and art. We very much continue in that vein to this day, hosting literary events, workshops, art exhibitions, music, performance art, political talks, community gatherings, and quite a few other things beyond that. That said, from our earliest days, our heaviest emphasis has been on poets and poetry. As George himself said, from the very beginning of Beyond Baroque, the poets tended just to take over the space. They would come to art exhibits, concerts, whatever, and lean their greasy head on the paintings, his words. So to this day, we're very much a hub for poets, even as we continue to explore the intersection of poetry with all the other arts. One of our main goals is to nurture new writing. We do that through our workshop series, which encompasses free weekly writing workshops, paid intensive workshops, seminars, youth programs, and all kinds of other sort of interactive literary spaces. Over the years, our programs have nurtured an incredible number of poets, writers, and artists. These include folks like Wanda Coleman, Amy Gersler, Dennis Cooper, the artist Mike Kelly. They include the band X. John Doe and Exene Cervenka famously met in one of our workshops. And more recently, they also, one of our alumni includes the country's youngest ever inaugural poet, Amanda Gorman. I think I met Amanda at Beyond Baroque for the first time when she was 14 and just enrolled in one of our youth workshops. And it's been an absolute joy to see her reach so many people throughout this past year. All of which is to say that if anyone in the audience is interested in working on their writing, perhaps to develop a piece for submission to the Santa Monica Review, perhaps to be the next US inaugural poet, perhaps just to find a bit of literary community, I'd encourage you to check out our current programming. Our Wednesday night poetry workshop has been running continuously every Wednesday night since 1969. Every few months, we bring in a different facilitator. At the moment, I think through the end of the year, we have the great Joseph Rios facilitating that. We also have a free weekly Monday night fiction workshop currently taught by the writer Raquel Baker. We have upcoming intensive workshops with the poet Jim Cushing and Cynthia Guardado, science fiction workshop with Rika Aoki. You can check out that and quite a bit more at our website, beyondbaroque.org. We're not only a space for workshops and mentorship, we also have regular readings and performances dedicated to highlighting major national writers, up-and-coming local talent, and also to giving a showcase to the array of presses and publications based here in Southern California. We've been proud to present many readings from the Santa Monica Review in the past. And in general, we try to provide a space and a community for writers to meet their audiences and to meet each other. In the next month or so, we have Connie Williams reading from his new book from the World Stage Press. We also have a reading with Kaya Press featuring Trong Tran, Mai Dervang, and Kathy Lin Che. And those are just a few of our upcoming programs. All of that programming is virtual. In normal times, our programming is based out of what is the original Venice City Hall. In that space, we have a theater, a bookstore, an art gallery, some truly beautiful gardens, an archive. It's an iconic building, but it's also 115 years old, so it's currently under renovation. That's one of the silver linings of COVID. We have the space and time to do that. Once the renovations are finished and the situation with COVID-19 subsides a little further, we'll reopen fully to the public. I expect that will be in January 2022, though we haven't fully confirmed that yet. So that's just a little bit about Beyond Baroque and what we have coming up. I would encourage everyone to get involved with us, or really to get involved with whatever literary space you have in your community. Writers depend on mentorship, support, friendship, finding community. Along with journals like the Santa Monica Review, spaces like Beyond Baroque are really vital to sustaining what really can all too easily feel like a solitary art form. So please do come pay us a visit sometime, whether online, in person, or support whatever literary community is in your area. And if there isn't one, this is, I think, the message from anyone who's worked at a space like mine: start one. Just create a little bit of a literary scene, gather your friends, put on readings. It's incredibly important. Anyway, so thank you all so much for your time, and thanks especially to Andrew for the invitation to speak. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with the Santa Monica Review, and I'm really just absolutely thrilled to be hearing some fabulous writers this evening. I think first up we have Tom Whalen, so I will just go ahead and stop talking and sit back and listen to some great writing instead. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Quentin, and thank you, Andrew, for your steady and superb stewardship of the Santa Monica Review. The short fiction I will read is called Mask in Louisiana During the Latest Pandemic. It appeared in an online journal, Fatal Flaw, in last November and was written in the spring of 2020. Mask in Louisiana During the Latest Pandemic. Soon after the coronavirus pandemic arrived in the early spring of 2020, everyone in Louisiana was wearing a mask. At first, we didn't consider it, but then a child in Bastrop woke one morning with the thought, if all Louisianans wore masks, might we not be safer and saner? From this one child, Albertine Alonzo, age 8, 541 East Street, the idea spread faster than a marsh fire. Town, city, parish, and state officials all came aboard, and shortly afterward, paper mills across the state were retrofitted and producing disposable masks daily by the tens of thousands. Now, All citizens of Louisiana are delivered a monthly supply free of charge. New Orleans, as one might expect, with its history of masking and Mardi Gras, was the first city to mandate mask, though mandate perhaps is the wrong word, since all New Orleanians acceded at once to the mayor's request and 100% saturation was rapidly achieved. Now in bars we wear masks, as well as in grocery stores, beauty salons, hospitals, and at racetracks where the horses too have partial face covering, and at ball games where players also gladly cover their mouths and noses. We wear masks while dressed in ball gowns, lingerie, police, fire and scout uniforms, hospital scrubs, gym clothes, religious vestments, hunting gear, or nude in the privacy of our backyards or private beaches. In bed as well, we mask, unless one sleeps alone, which statistically 3% of Louisianans do, the lowest percentage in the nation, by the way, due perhaps to our state's strong sense of family. Though prevalent in neighboring states, mask shaming never caught on in Louisiana. Only one incident has ever been reported, when a young man at a high school basketball game disparaged his peers for wearing masks. He was castigated for his behavior, and later that night shot himself in shame. No doubt this was an overreaction, but what if citizens of other states took responsibility for their behavior? On May 7, 2020, ABC News reported about the US, but not Louisiana. A dark new front has opened up in the battle over face coverings, which in recent days became flashpoints in a series of violent encounters across the country, including a security guard who authorities say was killed after telling a woman to leave a store because she was not wearing a mask. We are such a singular nation. This morning, I wear a mask whose nose is so long, I fear it will poke the crowd gathering in front of the St. Louis Cathedral. The steam calliope on the Natchez Riverboat plays Bye Bye Blackbird, and the air is full of the scent of beignets being served to tourists at the Café du Monde. All of us are masked and happy here on Jackson Square and stand 6 feet or more apart in order not to infect one another with a virus that statistically fewer and fewer of us carry. Like a bad memory, time will soon erase. Someday, we hope to become the mask we wear. At which point, mask and the concept of mask will become superfluous, and we will be free to close ranks again, to hug and love one another in ways only Louisianans can. In Zwolle, Winfield, Westlake, Waterproof, Ville Platte, Tickfaw, Sunset, Sulphur, Slaughter, Shreveport, Ruston, Roseland, Quitman, Provençal, Plain Dealing, Oil City, Noble, Mound, Minden, Metairie, Melville, Lucky, Lake Arthur, Lacombe, Krotz Springs, Kinder, Kilbourne, Kentwood, Kaplan, Junction City, Jennings, Jenna, Jean Lafitte, Iowa, Iota, Ida, Homa, Houston, Hornbeck, Homer, Hodge, Harahan, Gross Tet, Grand Isle, Grambling, Folsom, Faraday, Evergreen, Eunice, Eros, Elton, Dry Prong, Dixie Inn, DeRitter, Crowley, Cotton Valley, Church Point, Castor, Cankton, Bunkie, Bogalusa, Belcher, Baton Rouge, and Arcadia. Masks are worn with flair, distinction, and pride. Today, we are masking our statues. And someday, when we unmask them, what will we see? What we are? What we were? After all, isn't the sky itself, as our teachers taught us long ago, only a mask? Thank you, and thank you again, Andrew and Quentin, and I hope you all enjoy the readings to follow. The next reader is Mary Taugher.
Thanks, Tom. Beautiful reading, and thank you, Andrew, for inviting me. I'm actually reading a short portion of the story that's in the Santa Monica Review called What Mercy? Bed of white paper. Janine lay flat on her back on the examination table, gazing out the window at the blinding sunshine, at the skyline tinged with smog, at the palm trees, so terribly still, their lower fronds drooping like triple tiki skirts. The doctor's voice sounded distant and disembodied, as if it were coming from a loudspeaker, like a taped announcement of a fire drill. But this was no drill. Apparently, her body had gone haywire. It was producing too much collagen, which the rheumatologist described as the body's glue, the building block for skin and muscles and bone. Janine had always thought collagen was a good thing, the foundation of youth and all, but evidently, like a lot of other things in life, too much of a good thing was a bad thing. She had scleroderma, an autoimmune disease, and her body was spewing collagen like water from a collapsed dam. Already it had hardened her skin. Next up, her heart, lungs, and kidneys. Fewer than 250 people in a million nationwide had the disease, and somehow she had the most serious form. How unbelievable was that? She never wanted the blackjack table or slot machines in Vegas, not even a raffle at a school fundraiser. Way to beat the odds, she thought. I imagine you have a lot of questions, the rheumatologist said, looking down as he scribbled on her chart. Goddamn right she had a lot of questions, but she couldn't form them. She'd made the appointment because of swelling joints and a chronic rash, thinking, worst case, Lyme disease. How ridiculous was it that she was stripped down to her matching cheetah print bra and underwear when she got the worst news of her life? She felt as if she'd been caught on a hidden camera doing something stupid. You could be wrong, Janine said, her tone spiked with hostility. Fuck not shooting the messenger. I'm sorry, Mrs. Donovan, but the blood test from last month, your physician sent them ahead, and they're definitive. Your number on the Rodman skin score is moderate to severe. You have serious torsional stiffness. Then he squeezed her arm. She couldn't tell if his gesture was kindness or a last check of the beef jerky texture of her skin, and added with a sudden cheeriness that there was reason for hope. A new drug trial for an immunosuppressive drug that might keep the disease at bay for years to come. He smiled and turned to leave. Just so you know, your waiting room is the pits, Janine said. You're connected to a top research hospital, and the furniture looks as if it came from Goodwill. It's giving off unfriendly, ugly vibes. The doctor chuckled with dismissiveness. Be sure to make a follow-up appointment for 6 weeks from now on your way out, he said. On the 405 freeway, Janine gripped the steering wheel of her Honda Civic. The belching smokestacks and sprawling shopping malls, tacky condo developments painted faux Tuscany colors, LAX, the Goodyear blimp, everything looked surreal and faded out like a Polaroid photo from the 70s. When traffic slowed to a crawl, Janine opened the car window. She was afraid her car might overheat. She bought it pre-owned, and now it just seemed used, nicked and scratched, the hood discolored from a wax job her youngest son had botched. She still owed monthly payments on it. Would she live long enough to pay it off? She had thought she had decades ahead of her, and she had meant to do so much more with her life. Sure, she'd had her successes. She'd escaped her boring Midwest hometown with its aluminum-sided houses, escaped her irritable mother who lost an arm in an accident at the wheel and axle factory, and spent her days on the couch, sucking on cigarettes, watching soap operas. She's gotten pregnant at 19, but turned that into a win too, at least for a good 20 years, by marrying Will, her high school sweetheart, and venturing off to the Golden Hills and surf and sand of Southern California. After the second baby, when the boys were in grade school, she'd gone into retail. But for years, she dreamed of going to college or starting her own business, selling home furnishings or clothing. Now it was too late. And it looked like her one-armed, chain-smoking, 78-year-old mother would outlive her. Talk about irony, absurdity, injustice. Janine began to scream and cuss and slap her steering wheel. A beater car full of kids with surfboards stacked on its roof stopped beside her. Using her fists to wipe her cheeks, she scowled at them. A boy in the front passenger seat studied her, tilting his head like a puzzled dog, as if he'd never seen a woman sob and smack the nearest object. Then he held a joint out the window and yelled, "Hey, lady, you want a hit?" He was in his 20s, around her two sons' ages, bleach-blown, black hair, glowing skin, the color of a buckeye. Though Janine rarely smoked pot, she stretched to take the joint from the boy. Their fingers brushed, and Janine smiled weakly at him, this blissed-out boy who'd probably spent the day looking for the perfect wave. Her sons and Will claimed surfing was akin to a religion, and Janine wished now she'd been brave enough to learn. But she'd always been terrified, not of the waves, but of what lay beneath, a creature, a shark, or sea lion, or giant stingray that might snatch her, drag her into the depths of darkness. Janine inhaled twice and coughed before she yelled, "I'm headed to Honolulu." The boy grinned as if he knew what she was talking about. Traffic untangled and the surfer's car lurched ahead of her. The boy leaned out the window, flashed the shaka sign, and shouted, "Enjoy, Mama." Janine waved goodbye and tried to remember the lyrics to Puff the Magic Dragon, but instead what came to her was the intoxicating smell of her babies while she rocked them to sleep, singing about little Jackie Paper and the dragon, imagining Honolulu as a paradise colonized by loving parents, kind bosses, and attentive husbands. What a dreamer she'd been. A cot blanketed bed. Janine woke feeling like a dead weight, like a mummy wrapped in plaster. No wonder she'd somehow tangled herself up in her blue e-cot comforter. She looked around her bedroom, at her oak dresser and matching vanity with its cheetah print covered bench, at her skinny wrought iron mirror leaning against the wall with Japanese kimono thrown over it, at her purple, blue, and turquoise rag rug covering the pine wood floor. How much longer would she be able to live in her apartment on her own? In the 2 years since her diagnosis, she had become skeletal thin, except for her watermelon stomach. The doctor had actually called it that, because the blood vessels lining her stomach wall had dilated. Every morning before she got out of bed, she needed to massage her swollen feet and hands. These days, it was hard to button a shirt or zip pants. For work, she usually chose a long-sleeve pullover and elastic-waisted black pants. She wasn't sure why, but she was still dragging herself to Sur La Table to peddle muffin tins, cutting boards, and pot holders. Her friends kept pushing her to file for disability, but work, even the 4 hours daily she punched in for, was a distraction from thinking about the inevitable. One morning, a customer came to the checkout counter with a basket full of knives and potato peelers and other sharp objects. The woman's daughter, maybe 5 or 6, Janine wasn't sure. Funny, she thought, how you lost the ability to judge kids' ages when yours were grown, stared at her. She was scanning the purchases when the little girl tugged her mother's hand, hugged her chubby fingers over her mouth, and screamed, "Mommy, isn't that lady too old to be having a baby?" The mother, petite, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail and wearing workout clothes that showed off her toned body, blushed and said, "I'm so sorry," before turning to her daughter to admonish her. The little girl smirked and wiped her hand across her dripping nose. Janine wanted to throw her bottled hand sanitizer at the little girl. Instead, she pressed her stomach. "That's okay. I'm used to it. And believe it or not, your daughter is right. I'm carrying an in vitro baby for my daughter. We're 4 months pregnant." The woman gaped and turned a brighter shade of red. Janine knew the woman was going with not. She probably thought Janine was an alcoholic with liver cirrhosis. Oh, wow, you read about this stuff, but I've never actually met an older woman doing this. I mean, not that you look old. How generous, how loving of you. How's it going? It sucks, Janine said, in her sweetest, the customer is always right voice. So much worse than my other pregnancies. I was just a kid then, you know. Now I'm swelling all over. I'm up all night, nauseous, and I can't eat. Weird. She hadn't thought until now how alike and yet how utterly different pregnancy was from this diseased stomach. One heralding life, the other disintegration. The woman looked down at her cell phone as if she had an urgent message. Janine began to wrap the items in manila paper, starting with a 14-inch wished off classic heavy cook knife, a $600 purchase. Janine owned the same knife, bought on sale and with her employee discount. She'd stashed it under her bed in her studio apartment for protection against an intruder, though now she imagined plunging it into her heart when the time came, when her heart petrified, and she along with it. The little girl began to kick the checkout counter. The mother, scrolling through her phone, ignored her daughter. Janine's heart hammered with anger, with envy. This healthy blonde woman with her healthy blonde child, she had no idea how life could detour in an instant. She handed the bag of kitchen supplies to the woman and said, with an exaggerated wink, "Be careful of those knives around your sweet little girl." Bed on the other side of the wall. 2 months later, Janine quit her job and moved in with Will. A thin wall separated their beds, and sometimes at night, she could hear him talking in his sleep. She would talk back to him, tell him how much she loved him, how much she regretted her affair. But of course he didn't answer. He never did. She'd been pleading with him for years to get back together. The clinical trial for the immunosuppressive drug, the rheumatologist, a research specialist, enrolled her in, had been a bust, and he'd spun her off like a girlfriend he'd tired of. She'd grown more rigid, so that her heart began to misfire, requiring a pacemaker, and her esophagus seemed to have constricted to a wire-thin tunnel. Barely able to swallow solid food, she worried a cracker lodged in her throat might spell the end. Eventually, she winnowed down her life to close friends and family. She didn't want people to see her withered state. She didn't want their sympathy, their casseroles and salads handed over with advice about the power of positive thinking, the power of positive attitude and healthy eating. Their stories of others who'd made miraculous recoveries, especially the stories of how the Lord Jesus was responsible for those miraculous recoveries. Most of all, she didn't want to hear about their lives, their futures. Janine wasn't religious, but what with all her free time, she began to read books on spirituality. Nothing stuck except for a quote from one of Will's favorite artists, Paul Gauguin, who'd run off to live in Tahiti among beautiful brown women who wore flowers in their hair. Life was merely a fraction of a second, Gauguin said, a speck of time in which to fulfill all your dreams and desires. Why hadn't she realized this? It wasn't fair. It made no fucking sense that she, who had worked out regularly, eaten well, rarely drank, and never smoked, had gotten the short end of fate's stick. 47 was way too young to die. If only she had known, she would have lived her life differently. Thank you. And I'm very honored to introduce Lisa Teasley as the next reader.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was a beautiful reading. And I just want to say gratitude to Andrew. Thank you so much for including me in the treasure of Santa Monica Review. So happy to be here with everyone, with all these wonderful writers. And much gratitude to Quentin as well, because Beyond Baroque is a huge part of my literary. So I'm going to read part of a short story that was published last year. And all you need to know is that the first person narrator is talking to her partner, whose pronouns are they and theirs. So the story is I and they. It's called Chimera. Who's a good dog? They ask like a slur with so much spit, the teeth shines, lurid and conjuring of unseen forces, deeply underground like subduction zone erupting, and yet the tone, so high-pitched and haunted, it feels prescient of galactical event. They tell me once that their great grandfather died vilely in the camps of what the British also incorrectly named the Mau Mau Uprising. Incessant torture, rapes, starvation, castration, leaving them with PTSD in their DNA. When was I good, they ask, now an exhale of epiphany. We can smell the calorie pair like cum. It's what brought us here, wandering through the woods, our defects growing in the dark. Let's run, they exclaim, but I refuse. We could so easily trip in these thickets. With my luck, it would be fatal. What a morbid imagination, they exclaim, but I've said nothing. I'm just hesitating to run while they are picking up my thoughts, like they do in bed or in the kitchen. They feel my coagulated thought taking form. It's a dense energy, rueful and alive in itself, and they say they can see it, gaseous and deep pink. They tell me that if I don't watch it, if I don't work on detaching, it could result in death of the heart. The sun, our first god, is setting, revealing the moon follows them, looking like a plasma ball, and all I hear are their heels, snapping branches, dead leaves, the sprint becoming the trot of a tired horse, the breath heavy, rhythmic, and ragged. I'm following now, just like the moon, a red shadow of radio waves. I'm as lithe as a fox, trying not to be surprised by my ease, by my grace, or distracted by the perfection of trees, looking like towers rather than the old souls they are, holding together what's left of the earth. They stop us just short of a clearing, the plastic star's temperamental rave light hanging from their braid flickers on. I look beyond the hypnotic sight of the bluing of their skin in this wet forest hue and spot the car wreckage, a monument heavy in decades of graffiti. Chimera, they whisper. They call me that when they want more. Tell me here right now what you're willing to sacrifice. I back up from them, trip on something and fall on my ass. They are pushing luck. They are thinking we can make magic when everyone knows there is always the blowback to consider. They are forgetting that I was an arsonist. They are forgetting that I've left others crippled in their wake, and that asking me to sacrifice anything is like asking anyone highborn to give up privilege. They give me their long, soft hand. I take it. They pull me up from the ground and I dust off. They put their lavender infinity scarf around both our necks in a chokehold. They kiss my lips, their eyelids fluttering, and we are still and calm for such a long time. I feel wide and solid and able to hold everything I see in front of me. They take my hand again, now leading me to the marsh. Water I did not realize was here, just as the White House at the edge of the woods had disappeared in a way I thought I'd only imagined. At this point, a pterodactyl could walk right past, and it wouldn't surprise me. The veil is so thin right now. As we walk, I believe that reader of a reading I never asked for. It said I had once been one of the Shuar in the Amazon, that I was a large, powerful man, a shaman who healed with snakes. This is what it feels like right now, holding their hand as we squat near the edge of the marsh. Like I am that man, like I am that woman, like I am that two-spirit. They are quiet, but I can feel they are close to bringing up that trip to Barcelona when they threatened me with an empty bottle. I could go there with them, cross that bridge, bite their ear all the way through, spit out the lobe, then call it a quarrel. If they bring it up like I think they will, like I know they will any minute to get what they want, call me chimera again as they do, I will resist the theater. Let them talk on like I am Charlie Brown, hearing the voice of an adult as so much background noise. They are still quiet where we sit on a large rock, they below me on the slant of the slate, their hair in balls of fuzz from when they pulled their sweater on and off and off and on. I focus on a snail shell, inordinately large, white, and clean, the water pulsing from it like a heart. They're looking too, shoes muddy. The brushed material of their pants seem made of flies. I'm moving out, they say. I've heard that before and can wait it out. I actually already have a place. You did not notice the things I've already moved. I'm sick of your jokes. You've never taken me seriously. I just look like the last one, a good dog. You can send your posse comitatos and it won't work. Your parents will take care of rent until you pick up the next stray. I already asked you what you would give up for it to be anything close to fair, but you are a pig, and that is an insult to a pig. What happens feels like slow motion, like I'm a worn out old man pushed up against the fence. Their mouth is still moving, a black hole shooting blobs of bubbles at me. I shove them to the ground. It's no bad fall from this rock. It couldn't be. But the polyphony in my ears is deafening. Shadows are passing between us, hot glaring in the eyes. Someone's got a flashlight in our faces. Is she hurting you, it says? No, we're fine here. I hear myself say, incredulous that I hadn't heard him creep up on us. He keeps the flashlight in their face, not mine. He, the asshole who thinks he's my savior. They are still on the ground, bending the air with fury. I'm fine, I repeat, flipping him off. I hold out my other hand down to them and they slap it away, still looking up at he with the dead eyes and flashlight. Leave us alone here, I say to him now with threat. He shakes his head at me like I'm some disgusting mess. He can fuck himself. They are up on 2 feet now. They look at me, the plastic star in their hair flickering like a small bolt of lightning. They straighten the infant scarf, dust themselves off, the pants still alive with flies. They don't seem to take their eyes off me. It's long enough for the ground to spring flowers. Then they walk away. Lights all around them. None of this is really my fault. They were interrupted by their mother's death. Every mention of mine, alive and well, opens the wound. Could they know all of the things I love about them? Their architectonic drawings tacked all over their walls, their appreciation like mine of $10 words, their goofy foot skate style, how they love to do standing spoon in the kitchen, their penetrated moon eyes of some medieval black saint, their wild hair and balls or braids, their scratchy voice after bouts of giggles, their pink bud lips, their taste like squashed persimmon. Even if no one could see it, my great-great-grandmother was Ainu, oppressed in Japan. They never give me credit for being more than one thing. They look at me instead, sometimes for society itself. That is a lot of weight. I should feel lighter without them. I'm the narrator, aren't I? This is my story, not theirs. They are living to polarize. Thank you so much. And now I pass the mic to Diane Lefer.
Hello, everyone. Wow, Lisa. And thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everyone who's joined us tonight in this virtual space. I'm always happy to have a story in Santa Monica Review, especially in such good company. But instead of reading from the story in the beautiful fall issue, I'm going to read some brief excerpts from my novel, Out of Place, just came out a month ago. It's set in the aftermath of 9/11, and it looks at what happens to the international scientists who are doing their research at the Desert Haven Institute in the Mojave Desert. So what I'd like to do is first introduce you to one of the scientists and her research just prior to 9/11, and then we'll jump ahead later in the novel to let you meet another scientist, but this one is not at the Desert Haven Institute, but he will end up investigating it after he's recruited by the FBI. So here goes. Maria Castillo had a special love for rattlers. The red diamond rattlesnake, a regular pacifist, would back off rather than strike. The Santa Catalina Island rattler was evolving to lose its rattles. It would strike without warning. She got a kick out of the Hocico de Puerco, pig snout rattler, its black diamonds outlined in almost fluorescent green, and its head seemed to her not a pig's head, but rather marked with the eyes of a Luna moth. She loved the rattlesnakes of her country, Mexico, even though she loved her native earth even more, and it was because of the snakes she'd had to leave. Desert Haven, though, was okay. Natural habitat to the Mojave rattlesnake, the most venomous in the United States. From her collecting trips, she brought back 4 species and assured Karski the room would be kept locked at all times, and each glass cage would have a lock on the perforated steel lid. She wanted to map the rattlesnake genome, she told Emcee and Rennie. Compare pacifist rattlers to the most aggressive. Were they hardwired, or did something in the environment affect the enzymes, hormones? Talk about dual use, said Emcee. You'll find the key to turn a violent person peaceful, but it could also be used to turn a pacifist into a killer. They already figured out how to do that, said Rennie. It's called basic training. She's right, of course, said Maria. For humans, not killing is the default. Thou shalt not kill. Law and theology just put it in writing. It was already in our biology. And sometimes something made that biology go haywire, she thought. But when she told Karski what she would need, he leaned back in his swivel chair, the list she'd prepared for him fluttering between his fingers. Thermal cycler, he read, electrophoresis chamber, Erlenmeyer's, Agarose, blah, blah, blah. Why can't you be like everyone else and just use a computer? Then he leaned forward, elbows on the desk, in a posture that struck Maria as simian. When I was encouraged to offer you a lab, he said, no one said anything about snakes. He crumpled up the list. You haven't generated any income. Director, she said. She had the idea he liked being called director. I can't generate anything without equipment. The genome, she said, no one else in the world is even trying. Karski shook his head. We don't want journal articles. We want something we can patent. It was clear she'd get nowhere telling him the most significant discoveries happened by chance, just because someone was curious, because of an anomaly, because someone was troubled by something she couldn't explain. There is something we can sell, she said. I can milk the snakes for venom. This was exactly what she hadn't wanted to do. Yes, she intended to milk each rattler for enough to use for her own research, but on a regular basis, a commercial basis, too dangerous. You probably wouldn't die, but you were sure to lose at least a finger. Maria looked at her hands. She didn't play piano or guitar. Typing would be difficult, but you make sacrifices. I'm going to skip about a page to let you know how you milk a snake. You can't wear gloves. You need bare hands in order to grip and feel what you're doing. Maria loved her snakes, but there's no real love, she thought, without respect. They were used to her handling them, but only because they were used to getting a tasty rat in the feeding bin every time she lifted them out of their homes. Now she held the snake close to her body, gripped the head, and pressed it to the plastic film stretched over the funnel. The snake struck, fangs through film. This was a dangerous moment when you might startle and let go. Maria wouldn't be startled, but she had to repress the sense of marvel that made her weak with joy. The snake doing what it was born to do. The babies were the most dangerous. They would pour the poison into you, holding nothing back. Adults, like this one, kept some venom in reserve, and now Maria pressed the venom glands, taking everything the snake had. The tail and body writhed against her in protest. What happened between them, she thought, was intimate and violent. And she thought for a moment of her grandmother, the women of her grandmother's generation, those sheltered and innocent, ignorant girls who went to their new husbands with no idea of what a man might want. "What are you doing to me?" the snake might ask. She was the one with the power, the control, and for the time being, 10 fingers. Going ahead. Dewitt smiled, which is what he always did to put strangers at ease. He thought Macmillan was a potential investor. They came through Manatex sometimes, usually better dressed, and though they sometimes spoke to him an inconsequential question or two, this visitor said nothing, only looked at him a long time while listening to Dr. Avakian. Soon after they walked away, Tesfaye was called to the office. The man was seated behind Dr. Avakian's desk. "Close the door," he said. And once they were left alone, he showed a badge. "Have a seat. J.T. Macmillan, FBI. Dewitt's teeth started to chatter. They always used to when he was nervous. That had stopped after 9/11. He and Gladys had already known the evil human beings were capable of, and with the childlike Americans around them so overwhelmed with the knowledge, he took it upon himself to project an image of strength. After the attacks, he began to stand a little straighter. His voice was clear. He wanted to protect everyone, but it came across all wrong, as though he discovered pride because of the terrorist acts. "Take a deep breath," he told himself. It was probably about special registration, which would be a problem, yes, but he did have an explanation. He was an American citizen, had been naturalized as a boy, so he didn't think the new rules applied to him. And anyway, he wasn't sure which group he fell into. Born in Eritrea or maybe Ethiopia, in Sudan and Somalia. He'd been born, he believed, for years in what was now Eritrea, but it hadn't been a country then. And later he learned he'd been born in a refugee camp, and there were so many stories, so many lies. He wasn't sure over which border, if any, or where. Somewhere in the Horn of Africa. Had his mother fled across the border with him already in her belly? Or was his tortured, murdered father not his father at all? She was raped in the camp. His father could have been one of those. His father could be anyone, Eritrean, Ethiopian, Somali, Arab. If she was raped in the camp, it was almost certainly more than once by more than one. What was printed on his documents most likely wasn't true, and this agent probably knew it. "Did I pronounce your name correctly?" Dewitt nodded. However anyone pronounced it, he always agreed. All that new confidence gone. Why couldn't he have been David Levy? If the Levys had formally adopted him, given him their name, none of this would be happening, but they'd insisted he retain his own culture. Bacteria have cultures, he thought at the time, but had been too timid and possibly grateful to say it aloud. The first round of registrations had been the Iranian men, hundreds detained and locked up without cause, unable to contact their families. When the second round started, Mar from the mailroom, with whom he'd never spoken before, asked, Are you registering? Do you know if I have to? Where are you from? Palestine. Oh, far be it from me, Dewitt thought, to tell the man his country isn't a country, but neither possibly was his own. Masters in biochemistry, said Macmillan, coursework in bacteriology, experience in flow cytometry. He nodded. Could they possibly believe he would use biological weapons against his own people? Because that's what Americans were, his own. And the work you're doing here? Cell biologist, he said. And the project? That's proprietary information. I signed an NDO. Macmillan smiled. That was apparently the right answer. And I was appointed supervisor of lab safety protocols. What about biosecurity? I'm not aware. Did this mean he had not been trusted? I know about Asilomar, of course, but the languages you speak, said Macmillan, English. And I studied Spanish. I wouldn't call myself proficient. And I picked up a little French, vacations, conferences, and obvious what the man wanted. My mother tongue, he said, or more precisely, my mother's tongue was Tigrinya. Don't they speak Arabic in Eritrea? Many people do, he said. He wanted to say, I'm not an Arab, and not all Arabs are terrorists. We came to the US when I was very young. Then my mother died. She had killed herself. He had found her. He hardly remembered or didn't want to. I don't remember the language at all. This time it was the wrong answer. Macmillan pressed his lips together. Dewitt told himself, I've never given cause for complaint. He was okay as long as he could look at what he was doing instead of being looked at. Now in the spotlight, he concentrated on the man's face. Well, said Macmillan, we'd hoped to find not just a scientist, but a linguist. Then he said, would you like to serve your country? Thank you. And now betting cleanup, we have Adolfo Guzman-Lopez. Take it away.
You must go by the Santa Monica Review because of Mary's writing, Diane's writing, Leslie's writing, Tom's writing, Jim's writing, everybody's writing. And because on page 197, you'll read in the first person, Boomtown National City. National City is where I laid my head down on a rock to sleep. It's where I rode my avocado green 3-speed bike. It's where the scrap metal yards form a mountain of blessings and a mountain of curses. It's where a studio apartment on McKinley in Old Town National City led to 3 homes for my mother and stepfather. How can it be? How can 2 immigrants, 2 refugees of fatherlessness and lovelessness, 2 asylum seekers from worlds they couldn't fit into, end up owning 3 homes? Blind work, weekend work, living like the poor, not consuming, but spending. Did they do anything wrong? You bet. Just ask my mother, my brother, and my sister. National City is where I slept, but from where I left when it was time to go to school. My mother cleaned 5 houses in the same neighborhood, so my Pacific Beach school uniform was OP cord shorts and a lightning bolt shirt. My chariot was a fiberglass GNS skateboard with knobby orange wheels that played a different 33 1/3 melody on the sandy Mission Beach boardwalk Monday through Friday than they did on the bumpy sidewalks next to Kimball Park on Saturday and Sunday. I learned to be a Chicano while living in and leaving National City. Chicano history was all around me, but I didn't know it. When I was 10, Herman Baca fought for self-determination through the Committee on Chicano Rights in National City. That's when he said to the president, the detention of children is barbaric. Mount San Miguel. What's the name? Please, somebody tell me the mountain's Kumeyaay name. Is it the love of your mother? Is it the love of your father? Mount San Miguel is the eastern gate of National City, a mountain that opens and lets the morning sun through. The mountain is a tombstone and a launching pad in National City. Mount San Miguel has a twin, Cerro del Cubilete in Guanajuato, the dead center of Mexico. El Cerro was my mother's mountain, topped by a stone statue of Christ after the religious civil war. Guanajuato in National City. My mother's father, Miguel, not making it up, saw the Guanajuato mountain before Christ stood atop it. Maybe it was the last thing Miguel saw before he was killed. He was 23 years old. He shook the tree for land. His father had plenty, but that was 15 kids earlier. Maybe Miguel realized he deserved more when he sojourned in New York in a winter in 1945. So his grandson is to live in the shadow of the mountain for 6 years until his stepfather threatens to kill him during a drunken rage. It was right around the time I finished UCSD, a few months before the graduation ceremony. One of these days, I'm going to ask for my transcripts from UCSD just to remember how close I came in National City to falling into the mouth of the deep brown earth. In one of the ancient stories, the protagonist sleeps on a rock and wakes in a way that he's never done before. He says to the source of all creation, okay, if I make it, if I get what I want, I will follow you. I will believe in the oneness of all creation. Well, guess what, motherfuckers? I got it. Our beloved protagonist makes it. He builds, he loves, ruins everything, earns, spends, saves, comes back to National City, sees the rock on which he dreamed, remembers the promise he made. He wants to believe, but it's so hard to believe. Do you remember? Yeah, you. Do you remember when the Mexican-American mayor said, yes, of course, National City is a sanctuary city? It's as if he drove down Division, Florida, rammed that huge psychic sign over the freeway. It fell on him, and instead of a halo of chirping birds and stars, he saw the Hebrew words, Ger vetoshav anohi imachem. It's Abraham's big reveal as he's looking for a burial place for his beloved, and says to the Hittite, within me is a sojourner, asylum seeker, outsider, and a resident. Let's look at each other, comrade. We're both from here and not from here. And then the white mayor took over. And in a Frank Kimball voice said, hells to the motherfucking no, this ain't no sanctuary city. What's the matter, Frank? Compassion's gonna make you late for church? Let me let you in on a little secret, Frank. National City has been a sanctuary for sojourners, the ones from Hopkinton, Chandler, Lipa City, Tecunuman, Jerez, Romita, those towns in Denmark and the Tyrol too. National City is not unique. It doesn't only happen here. National City is where 1986 lifted an undocumented weight off me and my parents, and where it fell 32 years later, like a boulder on the corner of 24th and D Avenue, on top of 3 girls seeing their mother dragged into a Migra truck by 3 men. Were the agents trying to pull the mother's arms and legs out of their sockets? Stand on that corner and you'll feel the girls' screams rise like subway exhaust out from under the sidewalk. Are they wails? Are they the sound of vocal cords snapping? Are they declarations of the self-evident? We do not deserve to be treated this way. We are human beings. Should we carve an image out of basalt of a dismembered woman and embed it at that corner? For now, it's another point on the map made of fig and mulberry fibers. It's the map of detentions, of the crying, of the separation, of the centers, and of the hangings. The 1840s map of National City, the one that says we as white men have the authority to say this is the beginning, rests in a library in Berkeley. Look at the Sierra de San Miguel, El Arroyo de San Miguel, El Camino para la Frontera. Juan Foster claims the rancho. Somewhere on that map, in ink made invisible by the wind, are the Kumeyaay words. His name wasn't Juan, it was John. And all those Spanish words don't even come close to our eternal words for the land. The Kumeyaay words say, do not kill each other over the land. The night I left National City in 1993 is my beginning of time. My stepfather's threat birthed my first day in my first month. I left in a rush, out of the funnel, squeezed through. How did I get out of there? How long did it take? I found a home on a golden hill and didn't look back on National City until the library called on me to write a poem. It's there. You can read it. It's on a plaque next to the elevator. It has these lines. Read to the children so they can leave and come back.
Thanks so much. From New Orleans to National City, California, and all kinds of places in between. I'm so proud and pleased about this issue and so grateful to the readers. I also need to give a big shout out to Rob Rudolph, who's been our behind the scenes engineer for this meeting. I hope we'll be back in 6 months in person for another launch party. But meanwhile, I just want to thank again Santa Monica College and all the readers. You can go to the YouTube channel in a couple of days and listen to this, watch this reading again. Please do feel free to buy copies of the magazine and share with people you think might enjoy it. And again, folks, thank you very much for supporting this project and supporting our community. And can't tell you how delightful it is to be able to share with you some of these amazing talents in the current issue of the Santa Monica Review. Thanks so much. Sending you all our best.